Today's lesson is Rainforests of the Sea Under Threat. Hi, everybody. My name is Roger.
And my name is Helen.
And we're talking about coral reefs in the oceans. And, of course, we talked about two of them last time. We talked about the Belize Barrier Reef and also the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. And we talked about them as if they're wonderful places and they have no problems and all you got to do is go down and check them out. But as you can see in the title here, we're saying that these rainforests of the sea are under threat. So they still exist. They're great places now, but I guess they are in danger. They are in trouble.
Yes, they are in trouble because they might not be around for very long. And this has to do with the coral reefs. The corals that exist, that make up these reefs, are endangered because of various factors, because of climate change and because of other changes in the environment. So the rainforests, which are made up of these coral reefs, are indeed under threat.
Under threat, indeed. So if someone or something is under threat, that means they're facing danger. And unless something is done, they could be badly injured or even destroyed. So let's find out what this is all about. Let's listen to the first paragraph here. It's a short introductory paragraph, so it shouldn't be that difficult to understand. Let's listen.
These incredible habitats are, however, very much under threat. Indeed, the situation is so serious that most coral species are at risk of collapsing by the end of the century. The problem is global warming.
So let's look at the first sentence. It says, these incredible habitats are, however, very much under threat. So these incredible habitats refer to those habitats that we looked at before, which are Australia's Great Barrier Reef and the Belize Barrier Reef. So these incredible habitats are under threat, which means that they are in danger. They might not exist for very long, or they're not presently very healthy.
Right, and remember last time we mentioned the fact that lots of living things call these coral reefs their homes, like dolphins and tropical fish and stuff like that. So if you're talking about the place where they live, that is their habitat. So these incredible habitats, these coral reefs, are very much under threat. They're not just under threat, but they're very much under threat. That's a way to emphasize how threatened they are. Indeed, the situation is so serious that most coral species are at risk of collapsing by the end of the century, and the problem is global warming. So this is a very serious situation. And because of this situation, we've got all sorts of coral species. They are at the risk of collapsing by the end of the century. If something collapses, it basically falls down and no longer exists in its original form. Sometimes during earthquakes, of course, buildings will collapse. They will fall down. But in this particular case, we're talking about this ecosystem breaking down and collapsing. It won't work anymore, and that will affect all living things on the earth.
Right. Collapse could also mean to become weak or ill or to stop existing, and these all apply to the coral species that are under threat. The problem is global warming. So global warming is what's causing these incredible habitats to be under threat and to collapse, basically.
Right. Global warming can also be referred to as climate change, and we will talk about this dire situation as our lesson continues. So now let's move on to the next paragraph. We will listen first, and then we will discuss it.
Corals live in a kind of partnership with tiny algae. These algae give the corals their distinctive colors and provide them with most of their energy. However, when ocean temperatures rise, corals spit out these algae in a process called coral bleaching, which leads to the coral's eventual death. As a result of global warming caused by human activity, ocean temperatures have been rising, and rates of coral bleaching have increased dramatically in recent years. In fact, 3 mass bleaching events have struck the Great Barrier Reef since 2016.
各位好，第二部分我们看到单字 partnership， 这个字是名词，指伙伴关系或是合作关系。 字尾 ship 表示某种身份、地位或是关系。举例来说 Mike and Henry have maintained a successful musical partnership for many years. Mike 和 Henry 多年以来一直维持成功的音乐合伙关系。或是 Experts agree that the partnership between the two companies has been quite successful. 专家们一致同意这两间公司之间的合伙关系相当成功。另外补充2个以 ship 为字尾的名词。第一个是 membership 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 意思是会员身份或资格。我们可以说 Charlie pays $70 each month for his gym membership. Charlie 的健身房会员费每个月要付$70。或者 You have to buy a membership to shop in this store. 你必须要购买会员资格才能在这家店购物。第二个是 ownership 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 意思是物主身份或是所有权。像是 John now has papers to show his ownership of the house. John 现在有文件证明他拥有这栋房子。也可以说 The ownership of the house isn't clear because two people bought it together, but one person paid more. 那栋房子的所有权不明，因为是2个人合买，但有一个人付比较多钱。再来我们看到形容词 distinctive 表示独特的或是与众不同的。例如 That archaeologist could see the distinctive outline of several human shapes in the cave painting. 那位考古学家能看出洞窟壁画上有好几个特殊的人形轮廓。或者 Joe always wears bright distinctive clothes, so he stands out in the crowd. Joe 总是穿独特的亮色衣服，所以在人群中特别醒目。
Now, corals live in a kind of partnership with tiny algae. So corals, they live together with algae. Algae are plants that grow in water or in wet places. Typically, algae have no roots or stems or leaves. They basically just float on water or they live in water. And corals live in a partnership with tiny algae. A partnership is a type of collaboration or cooperation between two people or two things. So in this case, corals, this type of living thing, lives in partnership or cooperates with tiny algae. They help each other thrive. They help each other survive.
And be careful here. Algae, of course, is the plural form. Alga is the singular, but my goodness, I've almost never heard that word used before. We almost always use it in the plural here. So these algae give the corals their distinctive colors and provide them with most of their energy. So, of course, these corals have distinctive colors. If something's distinctive, it is unique, it is special, and if you look at the coral and you identify its color, then you know what kind of coral it is.
Right. You could also say that somebody has a distinctive voice. Adele, for instance, the singer, the British singer, has a distinctive voice because if you listen to her song, you'll know immediately that it's her and not another singer. And in this case, algae give corals their distinctive colors. And if you've seen coral, a piece of coral jewelry, then you'll know that the color of coral is usually orange or bright red, or it could be kind of like a peach color. In any case, the colors are very distinctive. So algae are the things that give corals their colors and also gives them their energy.
Exactly. So, of course, they are very important here. However, when ocean temperatures rise, corals spit out these algae in a process called coral bleaching, which leads to the coral's eventual death. Now, bleaching oftentimes refers to when something turns white, okay? So you have something called bleach that you may use when you do laundry to make your white clothing a little whiter, and sometimes people want to bleach their hair so it's white. So in this particular case, coral bleaching refers to when coral actually starts to turn white, and that's because the coral is spitting out these algae. If you spit something out, you remove it rather quickly. We do this oftentimes if you eat something that you don't like. It's the first time you ate it and you go, ugh, you spit it out.
Right, and this happens when ocean temperatures rise. So when the temperature of the ocean rises, gets higher, corals spit out these algae, and this process of spitting out algae caused by rising ocean temperatures is called coral bleaching. Now, coral bleaching leads to the coral's eventual death. So it's not just that the corals turn white, which may seem like it's harmless, they just change colors, but the whiteness is a sign that the corals are in very bad health and they will eventually die.
Exactly. Okay, so that, of course, will lead to the death of the corals. Eventual here just means in the end they will die. And as a result of global warming caused by human activity, ocean temperatures have been rising and rates of coral bleaching have increased dramatically in recent years. So again, we've got global warming, which oftentimes is referred to as climate change. And as a result of that phenomenon, the temperatures have been rising. We're also describing global warming as being caused by human activity, so therefore ocean temperatures are going up. And because of the warmer water, the coral bleaching has increased. So, of course, this results in dramatic changes in sea coral and increased possibility of all the coral dying out, and that does not sound good.
Yep. In fact, 3 mass bleaching events have struck the Great Barrier Reef since 2016. So this isn't just a theory or a hypothesis. Scientists aren't guessing that this might happen or that coral reefs are in danger of no longer existing, because we can look at what's been happening in recent years. There have been 3 mass bleaching events or periods of time when the corals turned white, and this happened in the Great Barrier Reef. And if you read the news over the past few years, you may have come across articles that talked about the coral bleaching of the Great Barrier Reef.
Right, so of course we're talking about mass bleaching events. Mass just means a large amount of something. Like in the past, in Earth's history, there were mass extinction events when lots of living things all died out because of climate change or because of an asteroid hitting the Earth and stuff like that. Those are mass extinction events. So here, since 2016, we've had 3 mass bleaching events, and they have struck the Great Barrier Reef since that time, and that does not sound good again, so I suppose we need to do something about that. Or the tourism industry in Australia will suffer greatly. How are those people going to make money if the tourists don't come to see the Great Barrier Reef? Who wants to go see a bunch of white coral? That would be disgusting. Okay, that brings us to the end of the second part of our lesson for today. Let's move on now to the third part, and we'll listen first.
To help save the reefs, scientists have been trying many different methods. One of these is to breed heat-resistant coral species, which could be used to bring damaged reefs back to life. But the solution is a temporary one, as there is a limit to how much heat even these corals can take. These efforts may buy reefs some time, but ultimately, only an end to global warming, brought about by reducing carbon emissions, can save these rainforests of the sea.
第3部分我们看到形容词 resistant， 指对点点点有抵抗力的。例如 Bailey does a lot of cooking, so she owns pans that are resistant to stains. Bailey 常常下厨，所以她有抗锈的锅子。或是Some species of mosquito are becoming resistant to insecticides. 有些品种的蚊子变得对杀虫剂有抗药性了。另外，把这个字的字尾 ant 去掉，就变成了动词 resist， 表示抵抗或是忍住。像是 This virus resists most vaccines, so it's particularly dangerous. 这个病毒能抵抗大部分的疫苗，因此特别危险。也可以说The smell of cookies was so good that I couldn't resist buying some. 这些饼干味道香到让我忍不住买了一些。最后我们看到单字 emission， 这个字是名词，指排放物或是排放、散发。例如 Reducing vehicle emissions is very important for the environment. 减少汽车的废气排放对环境来说很重要。或是Most of the emissions from the factory have no smell at all. 大部分工厂的排放物都没有味道。另外补充这个字的动词 emit E-M-I-T emit 表示散发或是发出，像是 The bread emits a delicious aroma when you bake it 那个面包在你烘焙的时候散发出很香的味道，或是 This old communication device emits a radio signal 这台老旧的通讯装置发射出无线电讯号。
So, are there any solutions to coral bleaching? Well, to help save the reef, scientists have been trying many different methods. One of these is to breed heat-resistant coral species, which could be used to bring damaged reefs back to life. So scientists have found one possible method to make the situation better, and this method is to breed heat-resistant coral species. When you breed something, you are producing new plants or animals from existing ones. And usually when you breed an animal or plant, you are trying to give them particular characteristics that you want. So for instance, you have dog breeders who may want to try to produce dogs that have a specific characteristic, like different patterns in their fur or different shapes of their body. And you also have people who breed cats. So these are breeders, and what they do is they breed animals. And you also have people who breed plants.
And remember, the past tense of breed is bred. Many different kinds of dogs have been bred over the years. And, of course, breed here is being used as a verb, but it can also be a noun to talk about different kinds of animals, like different breeds of dog. We've got black Labradors, Cocker Spaniels, Irish Setters, Boston Terriers, Basenjis. Those are all different breeds of dogs. So in this particular case, that we're using breed as a verb, and this is what people can do, or at least scientists can do. They can breed heat-resistant coral species. So they can go into the laboratory and kind of mess around with different kinds of corals, and they can breed species of coral that are heat resistant. If something's heat resistant, it resists heat. It won't let heat come in, or at least it won't be affected by heat, and maybe that way they can save the coral reef.
Right. So for the word resistant, you can also say water resistant to describe boots or jackets that will resist water, that won't let you get wet from the rain or from the environment. You can also say that a particular virus is resistant to vaccines, which means it cannot be gotten rid of by vaccines. So here we're talking about heat-resistant coral species, which could be used to bring damaged reefs back to life. When you bring something back to life, you make that thing live again. So damaged reefs are reefs that are dead or are about to die due to coral bleaching, and these new heat-resistant coral species might help in bringing the old damaged reefs back to life, giving them life again.
Okay, so that sounds like it's a magic pill that will solve all our problems, but here it says, but the solution is a temporary one, as there is a limit to how much heat even these corals can take. So you can change them a little bit, but not enough to make this a permanent solution. So it's just a temporary fix. It can maybe fix the problem for another 10 or 20 years or something like that, but eventually we'll have to face the reality that we are destroying the coral reefs because of human activity and global warming, so something needs to be done. We need to stop pumping so many greenhouse gases into the atmosphere.
Right. Now, these efforts may buy reefs some time, but ultimately only an end to global warming brought about by reducing carbon emissions can save these rainforests of the sea. So we were saying before that this method of breeding heat-resistant coral species is only a temporary solution. So being a temporary solution, it will only buy some time for the damaged reefs. But ultimately, the only solution to this problem is to end global warming. So ultimately here means in the end, and you usually use this word ultimately to refer to the main point or the subject of what you have been talking about. So you may have been talking about something that had many different points and many different arguments, but ultimately you want to express the main idea of your discussion or your paper. So here, ultimately, the only way to end the problem of coral bleaching or the death of these coral reefs is to end global warming.
Yep, that's the ultimate solution. Ultimately, we need to end global warming. And, of course, this is brought about by reducing carbon emissions. I think methane is also a big problem as well. But here we've got the phrase to bring about, which means to cause something to happen. So here, brought about, of course, is referring to how global warming has come to us. It has been brought about by having too many carbon gases in the atmosphere, or methane or other such gases. And so, of course, we want to reduce those carbon emissions, and hopefully those efforts can save these rainforests of the sea. Hopefully we will succeed in our efforts, and maybe we all need to take a look at ourselves and wonder what we can do to reduce the effects of climate change. Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. Let's listen now to Hanny.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第二部分提到，珊瑚与微小的海藻以一种伙伴关系生存，这些海藻赋予珊瑚独特的颜色，以及提供它们大部分的能量。那文中是用到 provide them with most of their energy 来表达提供它们大部分的能量。这个动词 provide 就有提供啊、给予的意思，在这边用法它是 provide 加对象with 加事物。其实我们在第一天的课文也有用到 provide， 它的第一句就有写到说 Coral reefs provide a home for all sorts of sea creatures。 珊瑚礁提供各种海洋生物栖身之处。这里的用法则是 provide 加事物for 对象。好，我们就来整理一下哦。假设我们对象是人好了，那要用 provide 去表达提供某人某事物的用法是 provide somebody with something， 或者是 provide something for somebody。 另外你也可以用 provide something to somebody。 注意这个介系词哦，如果你先用事物的话，后面就要 for somebody 或是 to somebody。 那你如果是先接人的话，后面就要接 with something。 举例来说， The hotel provides excellent service to its guests。 那间饭店为顾客提供优质服务。这句话你也可以说 The hotel provides its guests with excellent service。好，这边再顺便补充两个跟 provide 有关的用法。第一个是 provide for， 它有供养、赡养的意思。举例来说 He has a large family to provide for。 他要养活一个大家庭。那第二个补充的是 provide against， 它有这种预防啊、防备、防止的意思。 Provide against something 可以表达为某事物做准备、预防某事。这通常是指那种未来有可能发生的不好情况。像我们可以说 provide against floods， 就是表达做好防范淹水的准备。好，那么课文第三部分提到说，为了帮助拯救珊瑚礁，科学家一直尝试许多不同方法，其中一种是培育耐热的珊瑚物种。文中用到 heat resistant 来表达耐热的。补充单字 resistant 在这边是形容对什么有抵抗力的。有时候我们可能会看到名词后面接了连字号，再接 resistant， 就可以去描述是抗什么的、抵挡什么的。它是用来表达部分阻绝的语义。像 water resistant 表示防泼水的、抗水的。 flame resistant 表示抗燃阻燃的。 stain resistant 表示防污的。 heat resistant 就可以形容是耐热的、抗热的。那还有我们有时候也会看到在名词后面接了 proof P-R-O-O-F， 这时候是表达抗什么的、耐什么的。那它跟 resistant 的差异就在于 resistant 是部分主角，那么 proof 则是完全主角。像 waterproof 表示防水的、不透水的， bulletproof 表示防弹的， fireproof 防火的， soundproof 隔音的等等。好，那么以上是今天重点整理，我们来回顾今天单字吧。
Collapse. What were the factors that caused that civilization to collapse? Partnership. Our organization is working in partnership with the government. Distinctive. Zebras have distinctive black and white stripes all over their bodies. Breed. These horses have been bred specifically for farm work. Ultimately, all these concerns relate to two main issues. Emission. These countries have promised to reduce their emissions by 2050.
Discussion Starter starts now!
Here is our discussion starter for today. What are some steps we can take to help protect our coral reefs?
Well, if we want to protect the Earth's coral reefs, we have to reduce carbon emissions, and that means making some changes in our daily lives, such as reducing our use of plastic, our dependence on plastic bottles and plastic bags, and also maybe travel less, instead of thinking about going to see these coral reefs, taking the plane, which also causes a lot of emissions, we could just stay home and look at pictures of them on the internet.
Well, the best way to protect our coral reefs is education. We need to make sure that people know about the fate of coral reefs. We need them to know what's going on with coral reefs so that they'll start to care. And maybe they will start to do something to protect not only coral reefs, but other things in the world that are under threat. Well, everyone, today's article has come to an end, and I sure hope you enjoyed reading along with us. I am Roger.
I'm Helen.
See you next time.